of Bad Morning News, where we will cover just what the title says, bad news that's around this morning that you may or may not hear on the mainstream media outlets there. A couple housekeeping notes. Thank you to our sponsor, Brave Browser, for sponsoring the show. If you're tired of the typical corporations out there selling your data off to the highest bidder, give Brave Browser a try. If you download the browser via the link in the description to this video, it will benefit the show, so thank you to anyone considering doing that. And Bad Morning News is also looking for more hosts. If you're interested in hosting Bad Morning News, let us know in the Discord or in the comments of this video. And with that, I'll jump right into the articles. His first article is from ZeroHedge.com, from their Tyler Durden account. Early voter turnout surges as Republicans hold lead in battleground states. As voters prepare to head to the polls and the number of Americans casting early ballots surges, election analysts will likely focus on one question. Will the Democratic blue wave be powerful enough to reverse the early leads racked up by Republicans in 7 out of 8 key battleground states? So far, the enthusiasm levels among both Democrats and Republicans have climbed to historic levels, compl- complicating the efforts of forecasters and throwing the forecasting orthodoxy the notion that Republicans will pick up Senate seats while Democrats wrest back control of the House into doubt with the polls set to open across the U.S. in 24 hours. According to Bloomberg, some 34 million people have already voted in the 2018 midterms and in at least 28 states, and the District of Columbia early voter tallies have already surpassed their totals from the 2014 midterms. In Texas alone, where Ted Cruz is defending his seat from Democratic challenger Beto O'Rourke, more than 4.5 million people have already voted. That momentum has apparently carried over from the record turnout during primaries and special elections this year. People are engaged and voting in this election, said University of Florida professor Michael McDonald, but in what may be an ominous sign for the left, while Democrats are boasting a narrow lead over Republicans nationally, Republicans are leading in the key swing states, including Arizona and Florida. Still, this comes with an important caveat. Early voting data can only show who voted, not for whom they voted. There are other notable orthodoxies that may or may not hold. Midterm elections tend to have two notable trends. The incumbent president's party almost always loses seats, and Republicans tend to turn out more than Democrats. This year, those two forces collide. It's a real open question as to what ultimately that enthusiasm gap turns out to be, said Catherine Pearson, a professor at the University of Minnesota. At the center of this issue is an important question. Are these new voters who haven't turned out in past elections, or simply people shifting the timing of their vote? There are some signs that the former scenario might be closer to reality. According to Bloomberg, analysts will be looking at places like suburban Minnesota as bellwethers for Republican prospects. Two good signs for Democrats: women are voting at a much higher level than men in early voting, according to The Hill's Reed Wilson, and turnout among voters aged 18 to 29 who historically don't vote at nearly the level of older voters is way up in swing states, more than 400% in Georgia and Texas, and more than 700% in Tennessee. In Nevada, political sage John Ralston says he thinks Democrats have banked enough of an early vote edge, 23,000 votes statewide, that Senate challenger Jackie Rosen has an edge on Republican incumbent Dean Heller. In the Texas Senate race, both candidates, Republican incumbent Ted Cruz and Democratic Representative Beto O'Rourke, say the high turnout will benefit their campaigns. we're getting general confirmation where we can get data that the polls are correct, that we have some very close Senate and gubernatorial races out there. The early vote looks very close. McDonald said maybe in Florida things are a bit closer than what the polls suggest, including in the governor's race where Democrat Andrew Gillum has had a slim but persistent lead in the polls over Republican Ron DeSantis. How then to read the tea leaves? I would go with the high turnout model at this point. I think that's a safe assumption. McDonald said, "We are not seeing a 2014 election, we're seeing a cross between a midterm and a presidential election. The uncertainty among the professional forecasting class, which is still stinging from their embarrassingly wrong predictions in the 2016 presidential vote and the Brexit vote." 538's Nate Silver said that while his models project Democrats have an 80% chance of retaking the House, in reality the odds may be closer to 50-50. The range of outcomes in the House is really wide, he explained. Our range, which covers 80% of outcomes, goes from, on the low end, about 15 Democratic pickups all the way to low to mid 50s, 52 or 53. Most of those are under 23, which is how many seats they would need to win to take the House, he said, but no one should be surprised if they only win 19 seats, and no one should be surprised if they win 51 seats, Silver added. Those are both extremely possible based on how accurate polls are in the real world. For what it's worth, Wall Street and the business community, which typically lean Republican, is hedging its bets and contributing more dollars to Democrats this year, giving 85 million to Dems compared with 76 million to the GOP this year as of October 17 in what is projected to be the most expensive midterm election in US history, with some 5 billion expected to be spent in total. And that's the end of that article from zerohedge.com. As I covered last week, this is supposed to be the most expensive midterm in U.S. history, and apparently, a lot of the business community is uh, donating a little, well, about 9 or 10 million more to Democrats. I guess that is a signal that they think Democrats might win the House, since I think they'll tend to back whoever they think is going to win, so that they can get in, get off on a good foot, on the right foot with whichever party is going to be in power. They want to have their claws in, it seems. But yeah, I mean, I guess all the rhetoric going on is working with a lot of people, buying into the idea that this is the most important election ever in their lifetimes again, and that's why they just have to go vote. And if that means crawling over broken glass or whatever, some liberals have been tweeting out things about they would crawl over broken glass to vote or whatever. I guess that's how dramatically they view this election this time around. But ironically, even with all of that talk on the left about there being a blue wave because of a protest against Trump, essentially, apparently even people like Nate Silver, who was a pollster who had predicted Hillary would win and was horribly embarrassed, even he's admitting now that it could go either way, basically. He's admitting that he has no idea, which is the most realistic thing he can say, probably. That he can't say with any certainty that Democrats will win enough seats to win the House or whatever, even though he'd like to. Now he's admitting that he really can't say. And but yeah, apparently a lot of early voting is tending Republican, so it'll remain to see what happens with the votes tomorrow, if there are enough Democratic votes to overcome some of the early leads in some of these battleground races among the Republican Party or not. And I think, yeah, just in my opinion, is that it'll really be a wait and see type thing. I don't really have a lot of faith in any of these polls to accurately predict anything. I mean, as we should have learned after the 2016 election, you know, um, those just can't really be trusted. So it's really just going to be wait and see. And I'm just hoping for it all to be over soon. Um, I'm excited insofar as I'm excited for all the political commercials to stop and to stop seeing YouTube and Twitter and all of these sites out there pushing people to vote and trying to, you know, play that card again with young people, telling them go vote and whatever. It's so great and wonderful. I'm just ready for it all to be done, and I'm sure there will be a lot of new. Either whatever happens, there's going to be a claim of victory by both sides. I'm sure both sides would probably like to spin it as a win in their favor, but yeah, I mean it'll just remain to be seen what happens with all of this. I'll check and see. Danielle says, "Bad morning." Bad morning to you. Bad morning, Gregory. Gregory Patrick says, word in morning. Bad morning to you as well. Danielle says, vote tomorrow if you haven't already. Gregory Patrick says, indeed, LP all the way. Voting is not only a right, but also a civic responsibility, in my opinion. Daniel says, bad morning. Grab some popcorn for tomorrow. Bad morning to you, Daniel, as well. Yeah, I guess I'm in the minority. With among certain classes, I don't intend to vote. I'm not registered to vote. Uh, as far as I've seen, there's one race where the Libertarian Gary Johnson is making more of an impact. I think that's in one of the later articles I'm going to touch on. But with that, I'll read this next article, also from Zero Hedge. Hacking voting system. 2 days before the November 6 midterm elections, Georgia Secretary of State and Republican gubernatorial candidate Brian Kemp revealed on Sunday that his office is opening an investigation into the Georgia Democratic Party on allegations that it attempted to hack the state's voting system, including allegations of possible cybercrimes. Kemp, whose office announced the investigation in a Sunday morning news release, didn't reveal any details of the probe, which comes on the heels of a court victory by Democrats who successfully challenged the state's attempt to deregister 50,000 voters under the state's exact match voter ID law, according to the Daily Caller. While we cannot comment on the specifics of an ongoing investigation, I can confirm that the Democratic Party of Georgia is under investigation for possible cyber crimes, Kemp Press Secretary Candace Brose said in the release. Both the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI have been alerted. The state Democratic Party has called the allegations 100% false and an abuse of power by Kemp. According to the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, a computer scientist and attorney who are currently suing Kemp said that the lawsuit is an attempt to distract from a report about vulnerabilities in the state's voter registration website. The vulnerabilities could potentially allow anybody to access the voting records of individual voters. Poll numbers between Kemp and his opponent, Democrat Stacey Abrams, have tightened to within a 2 percentage point margin as Abrams has benefited from several celebrity endorsements, including the support of Oprah Winfrey, who joined Abrams in knocking on doors last week. The Daily Caller quoted Abrams as saying the lawsuit was a desperate attempt to sway the vote in Kemp's favor ahead of the election. I've heard nothing about it, and my reaction would be that this is a desperate attempt on the part of my opponent to distract people from the fact that two different federal judges found him derelict in his duties and have forced him to accept absentee ballots to be counted and those who are being held captive by the exact match system to be allowed to vote. Abrams said. For many Georgia voters, news of the investigation will not be taken lightly. According to a poll conducted by the AJC and a local TV station, many voters in the state are concerned about the integrity of its elections, including fears about tampering and ineligible voters casting ballots. That's the end of that article. The accusation from going from each side to the other side about the integrity of Georgia's voting system. Democrats accusing Republicans of deregistering people or the state unregistered people, and they challenged that. And but now apparently um, the current Republican gubernatorial candidate or current Secretary of State of Georgia is opening an investigation into the Democratic Party in Georgia, apparently claiming that they tried to hack the state's voting system, and among other possible cyber crimes. So it's not surprise. Nothing would surprise me at this point if they were trying to do whatever, as well as trying to get more votes in than may be valid, as with what they did with the votes who they got unregistered. So, I think a lot of this, tends to come up around elections. There's always accusations on both sides that the other side is trying to sabotage the election. As we've seen, obviously, that will end up being partisan, after the results are read, I assume. They'll have that in their back pocket to say, well, the loser lost because of meddling in the election process or with the ballots or whatnot, the technology, even. So that'll be another thing to watch and see if those accusations come up tomorrow. Gregory Patrick says, vote third party, piss people off, I say. Well, nothing pisses people off more than telling them you don't vote. That goes for everyone on every side. I've had left and right wing people get really pissed over non-voting, but I'm just over it, over the theater. Um, yeah, I'm just not a fan of compromise, and it would be a compromise of my principles to go and vote for whoever, unless I wrote in like Michael Myers. That might be interesting, but yeah, I'm just over the whole thing. So I do as Daniel suggests. I'll just watch from the sidelines with popcorn, most likely. Let's see. Daniel says. Daniel says hearsay on both sides. Vote tampering is yet another way to defraud an election, be it blocking entry or hacking the machines. Gregory Patrick says, LOL, true enough. I don't get mad though, bro, I promise. Yeah, that's interesting. Gregory has a new post in post promotion this morning. You should check that out. It looks really interesting. Daniel says, write your own name in if you have to vote. No one should rule you but you. True, true. Yeah. Yeah, I like that. I like that one. I'm not even sure if write-ins, if that's allowed in every state or if that's only allowed in certain states. Um, I wouldn't know. Gregory says voting for cartoons confuses the old people who count the ballots quite a bit. LOL. Huh, yeah, it's another interesting point there because that forces them to actually read it, given that a lot of people just use uh, computers to count ballots these days. Even just forcing someone to read it might be something interesting there. But this article is this next is from heavy.com. James Polite, Five Fast, written by Kate Pring. And apparently, this article is about a story coming out of New York that happened in the past couple days. On Friday afternoon, police in New York arrested 26-year-old James Polite, a Brooklyn man accused of vandalizing a synagogue with anti Semitic graffiti. Questions about Polite and many people on social media are wondering whether he is the same James Polite who was profiled by the New York Times back in 2017. The young man in that profile, who self identified as queer, grew up in the foster care system and grew up to volunteer for Barack Obama's presidential campaign, registering voters and canvassing in Brooklyn. He eventually found work with Christine Quinn while she was the city council speaker. He also worked on Quinn's unsuccessful campaign for mayor of New York in 2013. On Saturday afternoon, Christine Quinn issued a statement confirming that she did know James Polite well. She said that Polite had grown up in and out of the city's foster care system and had suffered from mental health issues throughout his life. Quinn also said she was devastated by his actions and denounced the graffiti at Union Temple, which she called a vile expression of anti Semitism. Here's what we know about James Polite. 1. Police say Polite wrote "Die Jew Rats" and other hateful messages inside a historic Brooklyn synagogue. On Friday afternoon, police in Brooklyn arrested Polite, a Brooklyn man accused of vandalizing a synagogue with anti Semitic graffiti. On Thursday, an employee at Union Temple found a series of disturbing messages scrawled in black marker all over the inside of the building. The messages said, "Hitler, Jews better be ready, and die Jew rats, we are here." They were written in the hallways and the stairwells on the synagogue. Police said there were also drawings of the Puerto Rican flag, and the words "Free PR" were written in black marker on the walls. 2. He has been sent to the psychiatric ward at Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn. The NYPD confirmed to Heavy that arresting officers had Polite committed to the psychiatric ward at the Woodhull Hospital in Brooklyn. According to a spokesperson, the arresting officers likely brought Polite to the psychiatric ward because of his behavior during the arrest. She wasn't able to provide any details about the arrest. In a statement on Saturday, former New York City Council Speaker Christine Quinn said that she knew James Polite. She wrote, "I know this young man, and along with many others in the New York City Council and social services agencies throughout the city, have done everything I could over the years to help him as he grew up in and out of the foster care system, in and out of the mental health system, and in and out of homelessness. And while he has experienced hardship that many people can't ever imagine, his actions are inexcusable." 3. Police say Polite may have also set fires around synagogues in Brooklyn. Police sources told the Daily News that they suspect Polite of setting a series of small trash fires in and around synagogues in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. Williamsburg has a large Orthodox Jewish community. Police arrested Polite on Friday night. He was wearing the same clothing that he had on when he was caught on surveillance video at the synagogue on Thursday, including a distinctive red suit jacket. The NYPD said Polite was 26 years old and gave his address. 4. Polite has been charged with criminal mischief as a hate crime. Polite has been charged with criminal mischief as a hate crime and with making graffiti. Police say he has scrawled He scrawled anti-Semitic graffiti inside the historic Union Temple Synagogue in Prospect Park, Brooklyn. He allegedly, I already read those details. And 5, the NYPD says there's been a spike in anti-Semitic crimes in New York. The New York Times reports that in 2018, anti-Semitic incidents have made up half of all the hate crimes committed in New York City. There have been a total of 142 crimes committed, which were motivated by bias against Jews, the newspaper says. Some of those incidents, like well-publicized attacks on Hasidic Jewish men in Brooklyn, were violent in nature. Others, like the appearance of swastikas and hateful messages in synagogues around the city, were not violent but were classified as hate crimes because of the message they contained. The NYPD says that so far this year, there have been 290 hate crimes committed in the city compared to 288 committed in the same period last year. Police say that 142 of those crimes were anti-Semitic. Yeah, all right. So that's the end of this article, and this story is pretty, I guess, kind of interesting, just because this the suspect was so close with the former congressperson or councilwoman in the New York City government, and apparently had an article. Let's see. Yeah, he was profiled by the New York Times last year, and now he's accused of this of vandalism of a synagogue. So it's kind of I think this plays on kind of the intersectional left type deal where there's always this oppression Olympics between who's the most oppressed, and basing their morality based upon like how many boxes you check off in terms of how many so-called minority groups you might be part of, or how many different ways you can be seen as an oppressed group according to liberals. And so this case is kind of ironic because this guy is a black guy who in his profile self-identified as queer, and now he's arrested for vandalizing for anti-Semitic vandalism. So it's just an interesting one among where I would wonder among the people who believe in all of that oppression Olympics stuff, and basing who the victim is based on how many minority groups are part of. It's kind of like they have to choose a side now because you have different oppressed groups on with the suspect, and with obviously the synagogue being anti-Semitic. You wonder, are they going to make excuses because he's supposedly part of oppressed groups as well, or do they totally ditch him and get on the side of rising accusations apparently of anti-Semitism. It's kind of this endless back and forth, and at the end of the day, I think that highlights why it's better to see people as individuals and not, not play up all the different group aspects and whatever. I mean, it's about individuals, and obviously it's about the actions they take. And if an individual is vandalizing someone's property, that is what it is, regardless of the race of people involved, or whatever other groups they may be part of. So, definitely one to watch. It turns the whole liberal narrative on its head in that sense. So, yeah, like Daniel says, polite will be a hard case for the left. A black guy being anti-Semitic is not a thing they can easily script narratives for. Danielle says, true enough. Daniel, let's see. Gregory Patrick said, I ran a polling station. I had to explain to them Snoop Dogg was a character and was Brodus. LOL. Interesting. Gregory says we put them into a scatter category section of other word ballots and log them separately. Of other weird ballots and log them separately. Yeah, that's a good, interesting point there. Even if having to make them read your ballot by hand or count it by hand, that's something there. Maybe worth doing. All right, this next article comes from Reason.com. Suave were vandalized after he criticized leftist bias. Samuel Abrams says the college's president accused him of attacking the community and suggested he might be looking for a new job. After penning an op-ed for the New York Times decrying the ideological homogeneity of his campus administration, a conservative-leaning professor at Sarah Lawrence College discovered intimidating messages, including demands that he quit his job, on the door of his office. The perpetrators had torn down the door's decorations, which had included pictures of the professor's family. In the 2 weeks since the incident, Samuel Abrams, a tenured professor of politics at Lawrence, has repeatedly asked the college's president, Crystal Collins Judd, to condemn the perpetrator's actions and reiterate her support for free speech, but after sending a tepid campus-wide email that mentioned the importance of free expression, but mostly stressed her, quote, commitment to diversity and inclusive excellence, unquote, Judd spoke with Abrams over the phone. According to him, she accused him of attacking members of the community. She said I had created a hostile work environment, Abrams said in an interview with Reason. If the op-ed constitutes hate speech, then this is not a world that I want to be part of. What's more, when the two met in person, Judd implied that Abrams was on the market for a new job. He said, I'm not on the job market, he said. I'm tenured. I live in New York. Why would I go on the job market? Abrams interpreted Judd's remarks as a suggestion that he might be better off leaving the school. Judd did not respond to a request for comment. Abrams' op-ed criticized the politically lopsided events hosted by the college's Office of Student Affairs, including seminars on microaggressions, understanding white privilege, and staying woke. It also included original research, a nationally representative survey of 900 administrators. According to this data, liberal administrators outnumber conservatives 12 to 1. This would mean the ranks of the administration are even more uniformly liberal than the faculty. While considerable focus has been placed in recent decades on the impact of the ideological bent of college professors when it comes to collegiate life, living in dorms, participating in extracurricular organizations, the ever-growing ranks of administrators have the biggest influence on students and campus life across the country, wrote Abrams. Many Sarah Lawrence students and alumni did not appreciate Abrams calling attention to this issue. There was an emergency student senate meeting, to my knowledge, said Abrams. It was his understanding that the meeting produced a declaration calling for him to be stripped of tenure and dismissed from the college. Judd sent a campus-wide email about the meeting, which she described as not only thoughtful but thought-provoking. The Senate asked me to publicly affirm that Black Lives Matter, that LGBT lives matter, and that women's justice matters, wrote Judd in the email. I emphatically did. The Student Senate did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Abrams' office door was vandalized on October 16, hours after the op-ed's publication. The perpetrators posted a sign on the door that read, Our right to exist is not ideological, asshole, and was signed Transsexual Fag. Another flyer demanded that he apologize to residents, life staff, and the director of campus diversity, students of color, queer students, trans students, and other marginalized persons. Multiple messages instructed Abrams to quit, and one told him to go teach somewhere else, maybe Charlottesville. Abrams believes the perpetrators tried to break into his office. Some of his books had fallen off their shelves as if the sign posters had slammed the door and the walls. "I'm really shaken," he said. Abrams' dealings with Judd have further unnerved him. During their conversation, she implied that he should have cleared his public writings with her before submitting them, something he described as unacceptable. Several of Abrams' colleagues met with Judd to discuss the vandalism and express their view that such acts could not be tolerated. Judd agreed, but did not pledge to take any further actions. These professors thought she seemed scared that the students might hold more protests, creating a public relations disaster, according to Abrams. This incident is an example of a concerning phenomenon: college administrators going soft on free speech in an effort to appease a handful of extremely aggressive students. Administrators should take greater care to avoid explicit ideological bias, and they must defend the free speech rights of professors who speak out against it. A college that attempts to muzzle, discourage, or rid itself of speech that offends the far left is failing its mission. And that's the end of that article. Just the latest story of campus outrage, students calling for a professor to, quit his job because they don't like the op-ed he wrote about free speech. It seems to be illustrating his point better than he could have illustrated it in any way. And I wonder if these people even realize that. I mean, if they even realize that they're just you know, adding to his point and proving his point that, I mean, things are just there. And I agree with what the writer of the article says. It's not even necessarily the majority of students on a certain campus, but it only takes a handful of really extreme leftists who will just cry about anything to scare the administration into not even bothering to come out in defense of this professor's, right to express himself in an op-ed, as what seems to have happened in this case, where the whoever she is, the college president or whatever, whoever she is refusing to really defend him, and is even saying that basically he should have asked for permission from her before writing the op-ed, and that he supposedly offended people, or that he attacked the community, whatever that means. And so she apparently is avoiding taking a side because she's afraid of more protests and PR things coming up if a few of these, even if a small group of these students, start raising the alarm and over nothing, um, over what, over his op-ed. I mean, yeah, I mean, where are things when you can't even write an op-ed without having people, come demand you resign from your job and whatever. I mean, it is really bizarre. It's supposed to be a place of expanding one's horizons. I mean, that's what I've always been told, and yet now it's just become an echo chamber. And as the article mentions, in a lot of cases, it's not even just the professors that are leaning to the left. It's mostly the administration, the ones who are in charge of like relations with the students and campus life, who are more and more leaning to the left, and they're the ones who really bring out a lot of these small groups of students who just will cry about anything over nothing. And as we know, the exploding number of administrators is due to, in large part, government-backed student loans, which just doesn't give colleges any incentive to lower their spending on useless things like just ridiculous administrators who like to just stir up controversy and will eschew free expression and free thought in the name of political correctness. And that's the product of all of this government, trying to subsidize pushing kids into college, and now we've just ended up with the prices going way up, and you get not much other than leftist bias at every turn. So, just another reason to end government-backed student loans and hopefully rein in all of colleges gaining, exponentially more administrators than they've had in decades past. All right. Some comments. All right. Daniel says 12 to 1 sounds about right for the current distribution of administration in unis. The fact is, the head admin is creating a hostile work environment and projecting that flaw on the professor. Judd clearly has no spine to control her students. Daniel says a handful of bratty toddlers, they should be expelled, and those admins should be fired. Yeah, I mean it's just as you guys have said, it's if she's not willing to stand up for free expression, then she's you know undercutting anything she could claim to be doing in her position as an educator or whatever, someone in a position of power at a ostensibly intellectual institution. That's just ridiculous enough in itself. So let's see. We got some more interesting articles here. This one is the News.com, written by Kip Robertson. Report: Virginia isn't alone in the late-stage talks with Amazon over second headquarters. Amazon is apparently seriously considering an area known as Crystal City, a large residential and office complex in Arlington, Virginia. Add New York City and Dallas to with Amazon over the company's second headquarters. The report from the Wall Street Journal expands on the Washington Post's report that the Seattle-based tech company was in advanced talks to locate a new headquarters, aka HQ2, in Crystal City, Virginia. Over the weekend, the Post cited unnamed sources when it reported that Amazon is seriously considering Crystal City. It's a large residential and office complex in Arlington County, Virginia, just south of Washington. Crystal City is served by Washington's Metro subway system. An Amazon executive reacted negatively on Twitter to the Post's report. Mike Grella, Amazon's director of economic development public public policy, tweeted, "Memo to the genius leaking info about Crystal City, Virginia as HQ2 selection. You're not doing Crystal City, Virginia any favors, and stop treating the NDA you signed like a used napkin." Grella didn't say the Post's report was untrue. For the most part, Amazon has remained quiet on the matter. The company announced last year that it was looking to open a second headquarters somewhere in the US, bringing with it as many as 50,000 new jobs. Several state and local governments threw their hats in the ring, offering Amazon millions in tax incentives if they opened their new headquarters in their city. Amazon received 238 proposals from cities in the US and Canada. By January, the company announced it had narrowed down the finalist cities to 20, 19 in the US and 1 in Canada. Teams reportedly visited representatives from all the finalists over the spring and summer, though details on the visits are scarce. In September, Amazon founder and CEO Jeff Bezos said that the company would announce its decision by the end of the year. Though cities across the country, including one on the West Coast, were considered finalists, Northern Virginia has long been viewed as a likely choice. A GeekWire analysis of Amazon job postings found the DC area had the most open positions in the past several months. 3 of the 20 finalists for the headquarters are located in the area. The second headquarters is expected to be equal to the Seattle campus between 2010 and 2016. Amazon estimates its investments in Seattle resulted in $38 billion to the city's economy. And that's the end of that article. So apparently, Amazon is looking for a place for a second headquarters, and the Arlington, Virginia area is potentially at the top of their list. And it's not surprising given there's been a lot, they've been in the news a lot in the past couple of years in Seattle with, obviously they originate in Seattle, but uh, given Seattle is very, very hostile towards business and, has just ridiculously high taxes and whatnot, it's not surprising that they'd eventually look to open a new headquarters somewhere else. And that's only sensible for anyone who's in the business. I mean, it would be practically masochistic for them to want to stay in a place that just tries to raise their taxes every year practically. And this will be interesting to see the effect of all this. Um, and I wonder if cities that are very hostile towards business will actually take a second look at their policies and realize that they're not going to win a lot of these big companies and jobs as well, or any jobs anywhere if they continue with their high taxation. It's just not going to make sense. So apparently Virginia is certainly a lot more friendly to business, and it's also very close in proximity to Washington D.C. obviously, and given that Amazon is really trying hard to get a lot of these government and or these military contracts, it would make a lot of sense for them to be in that area. It's kind of a natural progression, I guess, for them to be right there with the Pentagon and whatnot. And that kind of leads into this next article I have here, just more on Amazon, Jeff Bezos. This is from the AmericanConservative.com, written by Jason Ditz. Jeff Bezos puts the Pentagon on his monopoly board, while employees at Google and Microsoft are wary of collaborating with military. Amazon revels in it. Speaking at the Wired 25th anniversary last month, Amazon CEO Jeff Bezos announced that his company will continue to accept Pentagon contracts. That includes a very controversial cloud computing contract that Google and Microsoft have already backed out of due to vocal employee opposition to working with the US military. Amazon was long considered the front runner for this contract, but Bezos' rationale for taking it goes well beyond its being low-hanging fruit. He's argued that the government's job is to make the right decision even when it's unpopular, and that large tech companies should support those decisions irrespective of politics. The 10 billion tied to the contract can't hurt either. Whatever his motivation for sucking it up and taking one for Team Tech, Bezos' public justification is a poor one, and it isn't hard to see why. The Pentagon has a long history of immoral and reckless behavior, actions that objectively aren't beneficial to the defense of the United States. Any company that blindly works with them does so at its own peril. Employees at Google and Microsoft have already made a powerful case for why tech giants shouldn't collaborate with the Defense Department. They don't want to be responsible for developing technology that causes substantial harm, surveils others in violation of international norms, or contravenes human rights. The Pentagon can be counted on to do all three and more. Furthermore, the Pentagon's growing interest in artificial intelligence, particularly as it relates to warfighting, sounds out of the preamble for a dystopian novel. hence why Google employees forced their company not to renew a controversial Pentagon contract in June involving AI. While Amazon will be signing on to cloud computing, not AI, it's still more than a little concerning that Bezos was so adamant about the virtues of the DoD. For what it's worth, Amazon already works with the CIA, but Amazon has an interest that extends far beyond this single deal. The real prize is to become the military's sole procurement source for off-the-shelf components. This disdainfully labeled Amazon.mil by critics, this initiative is a result of a congressional mandate that the Pentagon shift procurement to a single online marketplace. The mandate is supposed to save the Pentagon money when buying run-of-the-mill items like bottled water. It would also give Amazon, the presumptive facilitator, a virtual monopoly on selling a vast array of items to a government department with nearly limitless money that's notorious for overpaying for things. Amazon is one of very few online companies that could even claim to provide this sort of service. In eagerly contracting with the Pentagon elsewhere, Bezos is laying the groundwork for this much bigger relationship. Yet being the Pentagon's friendly partner could come with potential costs. Bezos is setting Amazon up as an amoral alternative to the other major tech companies. When a Pentagon project breaks bad and the public starts asking how all this could have happened, the answer will be Amazon. A recent test case for this was the NSA's surveillance of the American public, intended to be done entirely in secret when it was revealed that the major telecoms were complicit. Even though they were effectively forced by secret court orders to cooperate, their reputations suffered a hit. Customers began asking whether their privacy was safe with AT&T or Verizon. Amazon's complicity may still be under the radar, but it is all the riskier now that Bezos has publicly defended working with the Pentagon on matters others wanted nothing to do with. His quote his quote about senior leadership making the right decisions could easily become the soundbite for a story about government excess going unchallenged by the private sector. Bezos tries to paint this with a broad brush by contending that major companies must not walk away from the government over politics, yet the consequences of Pentagon projects are potentially far reaching, and large American companies cannot succor themselves with the rationale that they're only following orders. Amazon is going down a risky path. They say that if you lie down with dogs, you get up with fleas, and Amazon has made a conscious decision to climb into bed with some of the Pentagon's most flea-bitten projects. If it wakes up in a mess, let's make sure no one claims they didn't see it coming. And that's the end of that article. And just as an addition, Bezos also owns the Washington Post now. I guess you know that that just adds to the network of conflicts of interest. I mean, how can one expect the Washington Post to be critical of a lot of all these government actions when its owner is in bed with the government? There's just things like that people need to be aware of and understand when they're reading most of these mainstream corporate outlets, that they all have connections with the government. And just because the US doesn't officially have state-run media the way other countries do have, doesn't mean that the media is much better in terms of the actual effectiveness in its, holding those in power to account in any way. I mean, if that happened, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in right now. So I think that just speaks for itself. But yeah, I think it's all just really uh, just getting really crazy. And let's see. Yeah, I mean the aspect of the Pentagon claiming that it could save money by having a single company to provide all of its basic purchases from bottled water and office supplies. Uh, that they claim it might help them save money, but as we know, lack of competition can also lead to them just paying, way more than needs to be paid, which is what happens now with a lot of military and Pentagon expenses. There was just a story a few days ago about the Air Force not being able to explain why they spend over $1,000 on each of these coffee carafe or coffee mug type things that they have, and they've bought like hundreds of them, and they're spending over $1,000 on each one, and they can't even answer why. Things like that, and it just ends up being another cronyist relationship, and unfortunately, just another harbinger of things to come. And it's things like this that never are addressed, when it comes to election day. There's no one to vote for who's going to fight against this. No one who's going to shrink the Pentagon's budget. No, high profile person in any case. I mean, yeah, there's smaller candidates here and there who do claim to espouse those values, but certainly no one in the mainstream, no one who has any chance of really winning or making a difference touches these issues. So that's where we are. Daniel says, oh, sorry. Danielle says, geez, as though the traffic around Crystal City isn't enough of a nightmare. Oh yeah, welcome to my world. It'll be like Seattle traffic with all the Amazon employees clogging traffic up because they decided to build the Amazon headquarters like right in the middle of downtown Seattle, and things have just gotten worse and worse. The traffic situation has just deteriorated more and more over the past 5 years or so. Daniel says, "Oh man, NDA violation. Some moron will be getting sued." And Danielle says, "Thank the Democrat-run Virginia state for those taxes. They cut off the state's nose to spite its face. They want businesses, but make it unattractive to be here." And Danielle also says, WAPO is pure propaganda and an Amazon Bezos loudspeaker. I definitely agree. And with that, there's a few more minutes. I could quickly hit this article and just read briefly some races that they suggest watching tomorrow, just to leave you all with that. Sorry, I think there was a there. All right, hopefully it's working now. It could depend on these 10 races. And I'll just skip to the races themselves. Number 1, Florida, Senator Bill Nelson looks to fend off Governor Rick Scott, Republican. Number 2, Missouri, Senator Claire McCaskill, Democrat, is in the fight of her life against Josh Hawley, Republican. Number 3, Arizona, Representatives Martha McSally, Republican, and Kirsten Sinema, Democrat, face off in the battle of moderate versus moderate. Number 4, Tennessee, Representative Marsha Blackburn, Republican, exchanges blows with former Governor Phil Breedenson, Democrat. Number 5, number 5, Montana, tight battle between Senator John Tester, Democrat, and State Auditor Matt Rosendale, Republican, is further complicated by Libertarian Rick Breckenridge. And so that'll be one to watch and see how the Libertarian does, and he'll probably end up being blamed by whoever loses, as we see time and time again. Number 6, New Jersey, Senator Bob Menendez, Democrat, may hold on against Bob Hugin, Republican, but it wasn't supposed to be this tough. Number 7, Texas, Senator Ted Cruz, Republican, might not be as cool as Representative Beto O'Rourke, Democrat, but he'll probably still win. Number 8, Indiana. Senator Joe Donnelly, Democrat, has the edge over former state representative Mike Brown, Republican, but not by much. And number 9, North Dakota. Senator Heidi Heitkamp, Democrat, is probably going to lose her seat to Representative Kevin Cramer, Republican. And number 10, Nevada. For Democrats to take back the Senate, Representative Jackie Rosen, Democrat, probably needs to unseat Senator Dean Heller, Republican. Honorable mention, New Mexico is the only state with a legitimate three-party race, though Senator Martin Heinrich, Democrat, is likely to prevail over Mick Rich, Republican, and Gary Johnson, Libertarian. Yeah. And Johnson was a former governor of New Mexico. And he has 13% currently, so that's pretty good for a third-party candidate than you usually see anywhere. And it's likely only because he used to be the governor of that state. So unfortunately, third parties hardly ever make any difference, and I certainly think if nothing else, it would be good to have more options. Even though like I said, I don't personally care that much, but I think anyone who's tired of what's going on now, it's hard for me to understand why people would still hate on the idea of a third party getting a better voice and more influence and time in there. People keep complaining and doing the same thing, and as they say, doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is insanity. And I guess we'll see how that insanity plays out tomorrow. And yeah, I'll be with you guys tomorrow morning. With that, yeah, this is a good place to end. And let me know if you guys have any other thoughts on tomorrow's elections. Let me know in the Discord, and all the links from today will be in the description following the video. And I think I got all the comments. Yeah, so bad morning, you guys. This has been episode 76 of Bad Morning News for November 5th, 2018. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Remember, screw the state, fuck the system. Have a bad morning, everybody.